Okay, this is my memo presentation for my macroeconomic policy review. I chose to do the inflation rate and unemployment rate because they're the most noticeable changes in recent years from the COVID-19 pandemic. Understanding these indicators can actually provide crucial insights to our economic state as a country and the effectiveness of our policies that we have in place currently. So historical trends for the inflation rate, I went from 2018 to present just to show a little bit before the pandemic and then the effects that it had afterwards. So in 2018, we were at a 2.4%, which the Federal Reserve, its target goal for inflation is 2%, so we were just above that. In 2019, we actually dropped to a 1.8%, which was really good for our economy. We had tight labor markets, steady consumer spending, and a modest increase in wages happening for us. 2020 was when COVID-19 hit and we entered a sharp economic contraction. There was a collapse in demand which caused inflation to completely drop. We were at a record low of 1.2%. In 2021 though, in 2021, it skyrocketed back up to 7%, which is very high. This was due to a lot of businesses reopening at the same time. Everyone was going back to work. And in 2022, in June, we hit our highest in 40 years at 9.1%. And this caused the Federal Reserve to adopt a more aggressive monetary tightening stance. 2023, we were steady at 4%. It was beginning to stabilize because of the Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes, which we'll talk about later on. And in 2024, it has continued to normalize. The fluctuations in energy prices are really affecting it. Geopolitical tensions are also affecting the inflation rate, and those two things, the energy prices and the tensions, are going to keep it from returning to its target of 2% in the short term. Next is the unemployment rate and historical trends. So as you can see in this graph, which this graph here is from the Fed National, the World Bank, which it helps us see right here in 2020 is the spike. We were doing pretty good, a low inflation rate, and then there was a spike right here in 2020, a very high one, or 2022, sorry, where we were at 9.1%. Over here is our high from 40 years ago. And then this is the unemployment rate, 2018 to present is what we're going to be looking at. So right about here, this graph doesn't show as far back. So in 2018, our unemployment rate was at a 3.9, which is pretty good for us. 2019, we hit a 3.5, lowest, which is our lowest since 1969, which isn't shown on this graph. 2020, with the closing of so many businesses so quickly, we spiked up to a 14.8%. The lockdown really had an effect on the economic activity of that time. To help with this, the government sent out stimulus checks. They provided unemployment benefits and a lot of government programs that's purpose were to soften the blow for those affected. In 2021, we were actually at 4% by the end of the year with so many jobs reopening. So we went from 14 to 4% so quickly. 2022, we hit 3.6%. There was a high demand for healthcare and retail workers. And in 2023, the unemployment rate hovered around 3.6 to 4%. This followed higher borrowing costs, and our market remained strong. Currently, our unemployment rate is at 4.2%, and if the U.S. faces a mild recession in the next little bit, which some people are afraid of, the unemployment rate may rise again. So now we're going to talk about the fiscal policy review of, so the first one is the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This act was signed and gave $1.2 trillion for infrastructure investment and $5.5 billion for new spending. Its goals were to modernize the nation's infrastructure and provide resources to sectors that are critical to economic recovery and long-term growth for us after the COVID-19 pandemic. So these sectors are the construction, transportation, technology, and energy sectors. So now we're going into the monetary policy review. So when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the Federal Reserve went into an expansionary monetary policy. They brought in interest rate cuts, so they lowered their interest rate target rate to near 0%. This made borrowing cheaper and encouraged investments and spending. On March 15, 2020, they released a press statement, which I'm going to quote now. Quote, to support the smooth functioning of markets for Treasury secretaries and agency market-backed securities that are central to the flow of credit to household businesses, over coming months, the committee will increase its holdings of the Treasury secretaries by at least $500 billion and its holding of agency mortgage-backed securities by at least $200 billion, end quote. So that was their press release that they basically explained what they're going to be doing to try to help bring our economy back to where it needed to be. So this balance sheet expansion offered stability to markets that experienced extreme financial vulnerability during this time at the very beginning of the pandemic. So some other things that they did during this expansionary period were a bunch of lending programs. So some of the most notable were the Paycheck Protection Program Liquidity Facility, or PPP. This was established to provide small businesses with extra funding through grants, loans, just giving them a little extra money so that they could stay afloat and not everything is closing. The next one was the Corporate Credit Facility, CCF. This allowed the Federal Reserve to purchase corporate bonds to support businesses in the corporate debt market. So businesses that weren't making enough money and couldn't really pay their debts were given help by the Federal Reserve. And the last one is the Main Street Lending Program, which provided mid-sized loans for businesses not eligible for the PPP. This was designed to provide these programs were designed to provide economic stability, support businesses, and maintain employment across the country. And then we shifted to the contractionary monetary policy in 2022. This included interest rate hikes. So they began rising them in March of 2022, and then in June of 2022, when we were at our highest interest rate in 40 years, they implemented a new interest rate hike. So the goal was to dampen consumer spending and business investments. Borrowing costs increased, mortgage rates increased, and businesses faced higher costs all around. The macroeconomic forecast, I think. So big inflation drivers for the next few years are going to be monetary policy, global supply chain normalization, energy prices, and labor market and wage growth. I think the Federal Reserve will continue to be cautious and aim for their 2% inflation rate. I think that unemployment rates will follow inflation rates. Global supply shocks could keep inflation rates elevated if things continue to go wrong. But if we have stable energy prices and a tight monetary policy, that should allow the rates of both inflation and unemployment to decrease, and we can get back to our targeted goals. These are the sites that I used for my information. Thank you for listening.